Welcome to Shallow. Join us as we explore the topics that are always on our minds. From beauty and wellness trends to balancing our careers and ambitions. These conversations fill our WhatsApp inboxes and social media feeds. We're diving into pop culture and asking the question, is it really that deep?
Contrary to the heading of this episode, we're not about to ghost you. We're just taking a short break where we'll be back for season 2 of Shallow. In this final episode of the season, we're diving into ghosting. Whether it's a sudden drop in communication with a friend or someone you've been dating, ghosting has become all too common in the age of social media. In this episode, we'll talk about why people ghost and explore the psychology behind it. Plus, we'll share some personal experiences, discuss where we stand on it, and ask, are we just too scared to have tough conversations these days?
Lucy Bell, how have you been? What recommendation are you bringing to us today?
Okay, so this is one that you've read as well. It's called Ghosts by Dolly Alderton, and it's about a girl called Nina. She's in her early 30s, and she's a successful food blog writer. And it's a little bit about how, you know, coming into her early 30s, she's kind of her friendships are a little bit different. She hasn't met the love of her life. Maybe she had a long-term boyfriend, and how she's, progressing with that relationship moving forward. And on today's topic, there's a really funny anecdote in it where she meets a guy called Max, and he's a handsome lumberjack. And after a few dates, and him professing his love to her, he completely ghosts her, goes off the radar. And I just thought that was a really good segue into today's episode.
It's so good. I think it's such a good book. There's so much about her. It's not just about her romantic life as well. There's her dad who's starting to suffer from dementia, and her friendships changing, and kind of this passage of time that ultimately we just can't get away from. But I love the way she writes, and I think it's such a good, relevant recommendation.
It's so relatable as well. I think no matter how old you are, when you're reading that book, it's kind of you can relate to it in some way, and it almost is kind of a bit of a foreshadowing piece of work, because I think as you do approach 30 and you get into your 30s, especially as a woman, you do face these questions of, do you want children, do you want a long-term partner, do you not want a long-term partner, how do you go about that? And it's just a really, really good book.
It's great. Would 10 out of 10 recommend. So we're going to talk about ghosting today. We were down at the beach the other day, and there was a group of friends mucking around on a surfboard, just having the best time. And I think, Luce, you turned to me and you just said, are these girls going to be friends in 5 years? Do they know what lies ahead for them? And I think it just got us thinking about ghosting in all its forms, not just romantic ghosting, but friendship groups changing, and how people kind of fall in and out of your life. And it's a bit of a heavy one, but we're going to try and keep it light. But I think we should start with the definition of ghosting. Luce, what is ghosting?
So ghosting is abruptly ending communication with somebody without explanation. The concept most often refers to romantic relationships, but can also describe disappearances from friendships and the workplace. And I'm sure a lot of people who are listening to this have had experiences with potential love interests and friendships, kind of going cold, or, dropping off the edge of the planet mid-conversation. I think that's something that's, my early 20s, when I was kind of dating around, and you'd be having a conversation with a guy, and you literally back and forth, and then they just eventually just never reply to you, and it would be minutes, days, hours, and you're okay, fine, let's move on. Then
I agree. For me, ghosting didn't even come into my everyday vernacular
because you were
dictionary.
The ghoster.
Because you were out here ghosting everyone you knew. No, it's not true. But I think until I started dating, and then you kind of can't avoid it, especially with, the joys of online dating nowadays, which is just how it goes. It's how a lot of people meet. I think for me, it feels very perpetuated by online dating. Not to say it didn't exist before, but that's when kind of I was introduced to the concept of ghosting. Did you have a similar experience?
Yeah, I mean, I think with dating apps, you can, it's not linked to your, unless you want it to be, it's not linked to your social media accounts. It's not linked to your mobile number. If you stop talking to somebody or you delete the app, there's pretty much no way that they can kind of get into contact with you, and it's very highly unlikely they'd probably ever notice you in the street, because there's such a pool of people on there that as soon as your profile disappears, they're not gonna remember you.
There's no responsibility there.
No responsibility.
Yeah, there's no ramification for just literally dissipating.
Yeah, and I think we'll touch on it in this episode, but similarly with friendships, it's kind of like there's no dating app for friendships. So when potential friendship kind of does come to an end, or just kind of teeters off, it is kind of a bit more of a like, oh, so you do know everything about me, you do have my details, but this is just kind of fizzling out. And I think when I was looking at those girls on the surfboards, I was kind of thinking back to myself, like in school, into college, and all the kind of friends that I kind of had around that time. And this just naturally happens when you get a bit older, but oh, that person's not in my life anymore, and that person's not in my life anymore. And yeah, we used to like
hang out
around together and just like be silly and like and I kind of like looked at them in a kind of nostalgic way, because it's kind of it was kind of nice to see a glimmer into the past.
Yeah, so true. God, I'm getting emotional. But I think that friendship ghosting, for me, I mean, before we even get into it, and I might change my mind by the time we finish the episode, but I feel like friendship ghosting has hurt me more than relationship or dating ghosting. And I think when it comes to friendship ghosting, there's no playbook on how to like end a friendship, and I think all round, be it dating ghosting, friendship ghosting, someone maybe in the workplace, do we just need to be better at being honest and having these conversations? Is it that deep, or is the shallow take?
I think it's interesting you said about the friendship thing there, because I think usually if you're ghosted by a guy or a girl or whoever you're dating, or if it's on an app, or you've been seeing them for a while and they go off the edge of the planet, it's usually your friends that are there to kind of pick up the pieces, or to kind of chew it through with you and talk to you about it. So then when you kind of take that out of the mix, and you're like, oh well, if you can do it and they can do it, maybe I can do it then as well. And then you're like, well, you kind of become a little bit bitter about it, and you're like, well, I'll do the same thing.
I think let's chat briefly about why people ghost. There's obviously a kind of fear of confrontation, emotional unavailability. There was a interesting kind of paper we briefly read for this, which was ghosting, social rejection without explanation, but not without care. And they basically say that cutting off communication spares the individual from confrontation, taking responsibility, or engaging in the emotional labour of empathy, despite the benefit a conversation can provide. In effect, it's much more convenient to vanish.
Yeah, you don't have to own up to your own feelings. You don't have to, what an in-person conversation and confrontation does is forces that person to respond and, say what they feel, or not only say what they feel, and if they can't say what they feel, then you can probably tell by their body language how they're feeling. And we've learned to pick up over thousands of years, like how to read people's body languages, and that's aided us in, reproducing, finding food, like creating a household, all that kind of thing. It's kind of aided us in our lives. And yeah, when you kind of take out that in-person contact, and you put it on a phone, or you put it on something technological, you're taking away that human aspect, and they're not thinking of you as a human anymore. It's the same with kind of trolling, right? Like, you're behind a screen, you can say what you want without repercussions, fuck this person, fuck that person. But in the street, in the UK especially, you're like, oh, pardon, oh, excuse me, thank you very much.
Apologise for existing.
Oh, sorry for existing. Yeah, but you can go home and just like absolutely rip a new one into somebody online. And that, it's just, in a way, that is a very British thing. It's a very like, we're a bit cowardly in that way.
Yeah, like I'm not going to say it to your face, but I'm going to say it to you behind your back. I think also it goes on to say that the study is that ghosters admit they don't want to hurt you, they don't know what to do. Sometimes they don't think discussing a situation is necessary, or they become scared. And that probably actually directly aligns with what you just said of like, there's an ease or maybe a slight panic of doing it in real life now, having these conversations in real life, and how technology has perpetuated this phenomenon.
Yeah, I mean, you can turn off your read receipts, you can turn off when you're last active, you don't have to show that you're ever online if you don't want to be. You know, it used to be when the apps first came out, you know, on WhatsApp, it would be like, you know, last seen at so-and-so o'clock, and the red receipt would turn blue. And like, I always kind of keep my red receipts on.
Me too.
And I think I like people to know when I'm less active. I am slightly suspicious of people who kind of do that. And it's always kind of, you know, when I've ever questioned it.
What are you trying to hide?
What are you trying to hide? No, when I've questioned it, it's always been kind of on the front of like, oh, well, I'm a really busy person and I'm working a lot and I don't want them to think I'm rude. And I'm like, well, you know, you can just send a quick message, just be like, I'm really sorry, I'll get back to you on this. Or, you know, it depends what the context of the message is, right? Like if I've just, you know, sent something menial and doesn't mean anything and it's just a bit trivial, like leave me on red, and, you know, and you'll probably get back to me or not. I'm not really too fussed. But if it's a direct question and yeah, the blue tick comes up and, you know, maybe a few hours have passed or it's the next day or whatever, it's kind of like, well, you've just forgotten, haven't you?
Yeah.
Or, you know, you haven't really taken the time.
I really want to root back to that. But first I want to ask you, have you ever ghosted anyone? We're climbing up on our high horse here, but I think we've got to be honest. Have you ever ghosted?
Look, I have ghosted people, but on dating apps. I've never ghosted somebody through kind of like social media, through text or anything like that. I think on dating apps it's so much easier. Like I was saying before, like you can just fucking
people feel disposable on dating apps, and that's the dangerous
they don't
thing.
feel real. I think it goes back to the thing of like, you don't, until you meet that person in real life or you meet up with them and you agree to meet them, you don't believe that they're real. It's almost like your brain is just like, oh, this is just a game. Like this is just like another app game that I'm just playing here. Like, oh, this person's hot. Like, you know, blah, blah, blah. Oh, they don't sound like my type of person. You know, why should I spend this time being like, oh, XYZ, I don't think I'm going to carry on talking to you. It just feels a little bit too deep. It doesn't feel necessary. And I think when you go on dating apps, I think there's a kind of realization that will happen. And I don't think, you know, these are people you don't know very well, like at all. Like these are complete strangers, right? And if they do ghost you and they don't reply after a little bit, like, I don't think it's that complicated.
It's not that deep. So you're all right. So going into the situations where maybe it is or isn't okay, let's chat about the situations first where you just said it is okay. Let's chat about that first. So what situations for you is ghosting fine?
Dating apps, for me, is kind of like one of the only times I think it's probably acceptable to ghost somebody. And when I say ghost somebody, I mean like never speak to them again.
Yeah,
like
I'm not
hard.
Yeah,
the hard reset. The hard, like, never get back to you. You send a double message, they don't respond. You know, that's the kind of ghosting I'm talking about here. I'm not talking about potentially like, you know, maybe somebody leaving you on red for a week and then getting back to you. Like, that's not what I'm talking about, because, you know, people's lives are busy, whatever, and we'll go into that. But yeah, what about you?
Have I ever ghosted someone, or what situation?
Have you ever ghosted anyone, Phoebe?
Yes.
Ghosting queen over here.
Love to just dissipate. No, I'm joking. I really don't ghost people, for the record.
Cut that out.
But no, I mean, I have done. I think we all have at some point. I do sit in the same camp as you, though. I think the older I get, the less I think it's okay. So yeah, I totally agree. I think when it comes to dating apps, there is an element of like, oh, if you've been having a little bit of back and forth, maybe you haven't met each other in person, how much do you owe that person, right? Arguably not a huge amount. The right thing to do would to say, I'm going to step away from this, or like, great date, but this isn't working for me. But, you know, 2024, baby, it's not going to happen. So obviously manage your expectations. I think for me, when it goes into the realm of it's not okay, is when it's a friendship or, you know, quite a strong pre-existing relationship of sorts. Maybe it's someone that you worked with for a while that you have continued on that relationship with, even though you're not working there anymore, and things like that. I think when there is a strong foundation of a relationship, I do think just hard leaving that person on red, never getting back to them
is a problem. And it's interesting, isn't it? Because I think, you know, when you get older, you grow as a person, right? You learn what you like, what you don't like. You kind of become a little bit more confident. You maybe mature a little bit as well. Like, your frontal lobe is a bit more developed. And therefore, like, it doesn't feel as excusable to kind of completely ghost somebody. Even in the dating world, I'm not talking about dating apps. Like, let's say you get off the app, you start, you know, dating in real life, you're texting back and forward. I mean, this has happened to me when I was younger. Like, you're like, oh, that date went really well, blah 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 blah, and they're like, yeah, like let's meet up for another drink, blah blah blah, and then nothing ever again. And you know, in that way, you're like, well, I've done you the courtesy of meeting up with you. We've had a nice time. We've had a conversation. If not, like, it's just, you know, respectable, two human beings having a conversation. You know, I would expect you to just be like, okay, this is not for me, or, you know,
but
I'm not in the right space of mind or whatever. And, you know, a lot of times I have got that or whatever. But yeah, I think as soon as you hit that barrier of meeting that person in real life, knowing them outside of your phone, outside of social media, I think there is a responsibility there to own up to your actions. And I think that only gets better with age.
I agree with that. I think it's the older I get, the less acceptable I feel like it is. I actually did have someone tell me once that ghosting, if someone ignored you or they weren't getting back to you, like that was the response. Like that was,
you got your answer.
Yeah,
like you don't need to double message because that's your answer.
And in some ways, I kind of agree, but I also think it takes the onus away from the person doing it, and it takes the responsibility off the person doing it. And I also want to acknowledge my own hypocrisy here, because like we said it before, we have both ghosted people. We're not pretending that we're
not being
perfect in this. But I think that, you know, I'm in therapy and have been for a fair few years, and I remember going into my therapist's lounge a while ago and just feeling like a really shit friend. And I think one thing that we worked on was trying to make sure I was maybe showing up for people more. And a big part of that was responding to people, being a little bit more kind of active and communicative. And I think since doing that, the pitfall of doing that is that now I expect that from other people. And a lot of the time you are setting yourself up to be disappointed.
You've done that work on yourself.
Yeah.
You've figured those things out about yourself that you maybe didn't like and maybe weren't serving you. And now you're kind of wanting to project that positivity into the world, and not everybody is at the same place. Personally, I think people have an issue with kind of accepting rejection, and then that therefore, you know, maybe puts people off from kind of saying this is not okay or this is not working, for fear of the response.
Yeah.
And I think that kind of ties into the fact that I feel like you do need to accept that some people in your life won't like you and won't like what you have to say. And, you know, you're not going to walk into every room and everyone's going to instantly like you. And you don't expect that in real life when you walk into work and meet everybody for the first time. You're not like, oh, you know, I hope everyone likes me here, but maybe they won't, and that's fine. Like, not everyone's going to like you. And I think accepting that is a really good step in being able to reject somebody, because, you know, you've got to accept that maybe that person's not going to like what you have to say, and that's fine. Like, you know, you don't always have to have you don't have to be gracious in your response. You don't have to be like, oh yes, like, thank you so much for saying that. You're not always going to get that response, which is the ideal response. But it's not always going to be that way. No. Some people are going to be like, oh, fuck you, like, I did X, Y, Z, and this, and the other. And, like, you know, that fear puts people off. There's this kind of culture at the moment, I feel like, when people are trying to, like, fabricate a perfect life through social media, and nobody is used to kind of entering situations where they might not like your opinion. You know, you're kind of curating this perfect persona, perfect life. You're following the people you want to follow. You're unfollowing the people you don't want to follow. And, yeah, with this kind of increasing technology, you're able to edit people out. And yeah, we're seeing this with kind of like social media algorithms, where software can edit the content you see down to the things you click on more. And yeah, we're just very, very used to being able to edit our lives in that way, that we can then edit people as well.
Yeah, that's a really interesting take, actually, because I think I've never thought about it like that before. And I wonder if that kind of feeds into the whole, we're not just ghosting people, we're also ghosting our responsibilities.
Yeah.
I think there's a really, there was an interesting article from the BBC that said a recent survey found a quarter of people aged 18 to 34 never answer the phone. So, for example, like not calling your doctor back or scheduling these important conversations because you're worried about what they're going to say, and not having that control over the other person.
I mean, I'll second that. I mean, I do answer the phone. I'm not so much of an anxious phone caller. I mean, I worked in a call centre when I was 17. Like, I got a lot of that anxiety out. But, you know, if I have an unknown number come up on my phone, it will give me that pang of like, oh shit, who the fuck's that? What do they want? Who's died? Like, what's going on? And like, I will, before I answer the phone, I will Google the number.
Yeah.
And sometimes it will mean that the call is like ended. But sometimes, it's the doctors, I'll answer it. Okay, hello, like, or, I've been expecting that call. But yeah, it's that kind of the fear of having something unexpected happen to you. It's like that rise of anxiety and like, oh, what if this is this, and what if that is that, and what if this person hates me because I say that I don't want to hang out with them anymore, and what if this person's, ghosting is a way of just kind of rescinding that responsibility.
Yeah, you're releasing it. You're kind of saying that maybe not my problem, not going to deal with this, going to put this to the back of my mind and hope it just takes care of itself. Looping back to what you're saying about social media, do you think especially kind of younger generations hiding behind their phones a little bit, and maybe especially post-pandemic losing those kind of interpersonal skills, the ability to maybe have a tougher conversation out of fear what the other person says, or because they've spent quite a lot of time online? Do you think that has anything to do with it or not?
Well, yeah, I think there's a lack of consequence for like ghosting somebody online. And I think, Gen Z specifically, and I'm talking about myself there, we're very used to having this online persona where we maybe aren't called out, and if we are called out, we will just delete that and never look at it again, or be like, that person's bad, unfollow, or whatever. Whereas like in work or in person, you may be physically called out for your opinions, and you may be confronted, but if it's through a screen, you don't have to. You can block that person, you can mute them, you can archive that, you can even archive their conversation, so you don't even have to look at the fact that they might be questioning where you've gone. So therefore you're just completely taking that out. You don't have to block them, you don't have to like unfollow them, you don't have to have that guilt of like them knowing you've blocked them, because you still want to keep a hold of that, like, if you saw them in the street and they were like, oh, well, where were you? You'd be like, oh, sorry, I don't think my phone's working, because I feel like when someone's blocked you, but you don't necessarily know when someone's archived your conversation.
Also, I think what we're almost saying about social media links with the dating app situation. It's both online. It both feels maybe like a virtual reality rather than in real life. So it almost feels that thing of like, when it's behind a screen, it's different to when we're seeing that person, maybe repeatedly or in real life. I think another thing I want to touch on away from social media for a second is, how do you feel about this culture of busyness? People using, I'm so busy, I'm too busy to respond to your message as an excuse. Do you think that is like just purely something, someone's busy, we get over it, we move on, they'll respond when they can? Or do you see that as like, how busy are you?
I think we're both quite busy people. I'm not gonna sit here and say that I'm working 3 jobs, but I do work sometimes six days a week, and I do have time to get back to people. And even if, I can't get back to them right then, it will be on my mind that I need to get back to them later. Or I will just send them a message that just says, I'm really sorry, I'm just really busy right now. I'm not ignoring you. I guess it's tiered, isn't it? And like, I think people could probably say that, they kind of prioritize different conversations over other ones, maybe work conversations to a friend you've known like maybe 20 years. Like, you might not get back to them straight away because you just know that they know you're not, it's not that deep, you're not ignoring them. And maybe somebody that you've just recently been friends with, or you're trying to create a friendship with, I probably prioritize getting back to them quicker because I know that, even though I'm busy, I'm like, I still have to make time for friendships. And yeah, I feel like for me, it's a little bit of a cop-out being, oh, I'm busy this. I'm like, okay. And that's just kind of taking away from the fact that you don't think that I'm busy, or you don't think that everyone else around you is busy. And that's totally fine. Like, if you can't get back to me, or you can't have a conversation with me right now about whatever I'm asking you, that's fine. Just send me a message. Just be like, I'm really sorry. I'm in work. I'm going through something. I can't talk.
Yeah, like, I'll get back to you when I can. I think, do you ever get phone overwhelm where, your maybe life's a bit overwhelming, you've got a lot pinging through your phone? Do you kind of bury your head in the sand, or do you attack that list?
I think my personality type is to attack. I'm a very anxious person, so I think that feeds into everything I kind of do. So I will need to kind of wrap everything up, because otherwise I'm like, oh, but this, that, what if that, and I have to make sure that person's been messaged back, or that document's been sent out, or that email's been sent out, and it kind of all ties into everything. It's not just like I'm like, oh, I'm so anxious about this person not messaging me back. To be quite honest with you, if somebody doesn't message me back, I'm not stressing about that. I'm just kind of like, okay, well, let's see how long this goes on for then. And then it's telling, like, if they get back to me in a week, I'm like, oh, whatever. You know, I'm really sorry, I'm really busy. I completely got lost in my inbox. Like, I'm like, whatever, they're a good friend, it's fine.
Yeah.
But, you know, if you are starting to create a relationship with somebody, or you're trying to form a friendship, and early on it's feeling a little bit forced, or a little bit like maybe you don't want to get back to them, or they don't want to get back to you, then yeah, I think it's very telling.
Yeah, interesting. No, I think there's so much to attack here. And I think actually even during this conversation, like, I've changed my mind multiple times. Like, listening to you talk, it's made me think, like, actually I think this is almost like a bit of a tiered approach. And I'm taking, like, the harsh ghosting out of it, which I think we've kind of both come to the conclusion of we're not cool with it outside of that kind of dating app environment. If you've met someone, you have a pre-existing relationship with them, you have a friendship with them, if you don't want to talk to them anymore, you probably owe that person an explanation, I think, especially if potentially there hasn't been a big bust up. I think that's the other thing, because it can often leave the other person wondering, and I've sat on both sides of this fence, by the way, where I've been the ghoster and the ghostee, and I know it's left the other person wondering what they've done, and they've gone to a certain place over that, and I obviously feel really uncomfortable.
And where does anxiety take you? To the worst possible
outcome. We know this, we're both very anxious people. So I think it's a really interesting one. It's a really nuanced one, but I'm going to ask you the question, ghosting, is it that deep?
I think it's deep in the way that young people and Gen Z are kind of approaching it. And it's from a scared mentality of, like, I don't want to own up to my responsibilities. I don't want to have to say what I actually think for fear of repercussions. But in terms of kind of, like, you know, the day-to-day kind of, maybe somebody not get back to you for 1 or 2 days, I don't think that's that deep. But yeah, on more of the kind of, like, social skills aspect of, like, maybe you should own up to not liking that guy or not wanting to spend time with him. He's maybe left wondering, you know, if his insecurities that he was worried about that day are prevalent. Like, that's another thing as well. It's like, you go on a date, maybe you're a bit self-conscious about your hair or your skin or, you know, your body, and you come away from that and that person says, oh, had a really nice day, and then they just drop off the face of the planet. You know, your anxieties can come into that and be like, oh, was it my weight? Was it my skin? And then, you know, that kind of feeds that kind of anxious brain. And I think it can be quite responsible to take that aspect out of it and just be like, you know what, it's just not that deep. I'm not that interested in you, or I'm just going through something at the moment, or, you know, I'm not in the place for this, you know, the classics. But yeah, I think it can mess with people's psyches doing that. But yeah, do you feel that ghosting is that deep? Do you think that there is a place for it? Or do you think that people should just own up to their shit and just say what they think?
God, I feel like I'm bringing so many disclaimers to this podcast. I'm like, asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. But I think that it is so dependent on the situation. And, you know, for example, I've had a friend who I've voice noted a couple of weeks ago. She hasn't responded, but there is not a doubt in my mind that she will speak to me. Like, I know that she's seen it, she's read it, she's listened to it, and she will get back to me when she can. And I'm cool with that. That's totally fine. We've been friends.
You're not stressed about that?
Not stressed about it. We've been friends for a really long time, and she's a very communicative person. So at the moment, I assume she's busy. Maybe she doesn't have anything to report on, is what it is. There's 2 situations where I think discussing all of this, maybe I find it a problem. And maybe you could argue that this is like a me problem, not an anyone else problem. But I think we've obviously hammered the dating app stuff to death. I do think if you have met someone and you don't want to maybe see them again, you probably owe them that, like, this wasn't doing it for me conversation, just for a little bit of closure. I think the other side of it is if you've been friends with someone for a long time and you speak to that person maybe every day, every other day, every week, and that person does just dissipate, is it on you to chase that up, or is it on the other person to actually say, I'm not good anymore? Or is the mutual silence telling?
Do you know what I think it is as well? I think it's when you're friends with somebody, you know their nuances, you know them as a person, especially if you've known them for quite a few years, or you've known them since you were a kid, or you've known them like however long. You kind of are used to their patterns of behavior, right? You know how they chat, that you know how they text, you know how they talk in real life. So when those patterns are kind of broken up and you kind of notice a little bit different, and your kind of gut is telling you something like, this is not how we usually chat, this is not how
something's off.
I have a friend, a really, really good friend of mine, and we won't talk all the time by text. We're not like, we maybe send a couple back and forward, but I won't, maybe I'll see her once a month or once every 2 months, but I'm not stressed that she's ghosting me or will be ghosting me. I just know that that's how our friendship works. So when you've been chatting to somebody and there's a different dynamic, and then they just drop off the face of the earth, then you're questioning, okay, that was out of the blue, that's not okay, I don't agree with that. That's a bit of a red flag.
And your brain starts worrying of like, what have I done wrong? What's happened here? Or is this person okay? Why are they not talking to me? And that goes back to what I said at the top of the episode, which is probably that I find the friendship side of ghosting harder than the dating app side of ghosting. But I think in all of this discussion, I think we are going to have to do an episode on friendship breakups, because I just feel like we've barely scratched the surface. But I think that's probably a good place to wrap up. I actually found this episode pretty challenging, but in a really good way. I think we had a good nuanced discussion there. If you got anything to add, Luce?
I just think as I get older and as we get kind of grow as people and, figure out who we are, who we like, our careers, I think it's just going to be easier to kind of deal with these situations and be able to kind of take the emotion out of it if somebody ghosts you, because maybe they aren't benefiting your life, maybe they aren't serving you. If they ghost you and never message you back ever again, then that's quite telling of maybe who they are as a person and who they are to you, and maybe that's not as important.
Yeah, you've got your answer. They're drawing a boundary, move on.